research. And we've actually continued to monitor developments in election cybercrime over the past year. And so we've actually included some new stuff from 2013. Looking back at recent work, we really could only find a single source for election-related cyber crimes, which was Frederick's 2008 Black Hat presentation titled Cybercrime in the Electoral System. Frederick identified cybercrime in the 2008 election, and we found similar types of activities, most notably cyber squatting. Cyber squatting is basically registering a domain name in bad faith for a purpose contrary to its intended use. So how can cyber squatting be effective in an election? You can create a website based on a politician's name that discusses problems with that politician. Maybe not necessarily illegal, morally dubious, but you can also create a website based on a politician's name that redirects to a porn site. That is quite different, and frankly, I'm really excited for when that actually happens. Yeah. Robert said that it makes them much easier to find. So this table shows some malicious domains that we identified. The left-hand column shows the URL, and the right-hand column shows what page you would see. We didn't identify any sites that redirect to porn, but we did find Viagra storefronts. And so here are sort of the types of things we found. And many of these sites were just really redirections or copies of another politician's site. Bless you. So we saw conservative candidates stealing attention from each other, mostly. For instance, the first two sites listed here are a play on Mitt Romney's name. The first is mittromney.com with a zero, and it's a copy of ronpaul.com. And then the second was mitronme, which was a copy of GaryJohnson2012.com, which is the libertarian candidate's site. Number 5 there, donateobama.com. Number 6 was this awkward musician's website. You guys got to go check it out. It's a really weird headshot. Number 7, Barack Obama 2008 or something like that was a third-party Barack Obama site selling Viagra. And 8 and 9 were the most interesting cases. 8 was DemocraticNationalCommittee.org, which was basically a fake site for Democrats.org. And then number 9 was the RepublicanNationalCommittee.org, which was a fake site for GOP.com. So let's take a look at a few of these. This one is, if you notice in the top left, it says mitronme.com, but it's redirecting to Gary Johnson's site. And you can see that in the URL in the upper left-hand corner. I think this is left for you all. And if you'll notice, there's a giant 1% there, but there's 2 fingers. I've been looking at the site for the past 6 months. I don't understand that. And if you notice here, you'll see this is Barack Obama. And there's also something odd going on here that besides that horrendous web design, right? I mean, and if we try and visit any of these sites today, this is the typical response provided from Chrome. Nothing's actually working. I'm going to pass it off to Josh.
So we can't talk about cyber squatting without talking about kind of the goals intended for this. And you have a lot of times where you find they were asking for donations, but the donations were not actually going to any of the candidates, to anything that they were intended to. And we kind of just want to term this fundraising. As Josh mentioned, we had the DemocraticNationalCommittee.org and RepublicanNationalCommittee.org, but both of these were while they gave overall political topics to make it seem legitimate, they were often hiding search engine optimization links at the very bottom. The Who Is information, as we followed it, was not obscured in any way. So we could actually find out that it was owned and operated by the same individual, and it traced back to the same IP and the same, it was hosted at a data center in Oregon. Here's the screenshot of democraticnationalcommittee.org with an obvious asking for donation in the upper right-hand corner. We also have fake political campaigns. Most of these tend to be, for comedic effect. Bender for president, Ron Swanson, 2012. But the intent can vary away from being comedic in nature into the malicious area. And here's a nice shot of Ron Swanson, 2012. So, as I said, we have malicious intent, or at least misleading in this, these first two bullets. There were many fake Twitter handles created, such as The Real Ted Cruz or Bill Clinton 2012, which we actually have a screenshot of the Bill Clinton one below. But these popped up. They weren't obviously run by the politician themselves, and they ran counter to their position in the election. The Bill Clinton one and several other Democrats ones were suspended very quickly. The Real Ted Cruz, we found, still exists, but it's locked down, and I'm not on Twitter, so I'm not following him at this time. We also found that actual campaigns had millions of fake Twitter followers, giving them a much larger online presence than they normally would have. And so we kind of have to ask the question at this time, if actual political parties are going down this route, doing this stuff, what are the people that are going to be malicious going to do? And we know that there's already plenty of malicious activity as it pertains to Twitter, but we could, at this point, I don't think we have any documented methods of ways people used Twitter during the 2012 election. Another area was the super PACs that arose during the 2012 election. This wasn't the first election that they were part of. The court case which allowed super PACs to come into existence was in 2010, so they were able to take part in the election then, but this was the first presidential campaign that they actually were a part of. Pretty much super PACs were allowed unlimited fundraising. They had no limits. The only, one of the major stipulations is that they could not give that money directly to a candidate. However, that doesn't stop them from campaigning on the politician's behalf. Our Country Deserves Better PAC was one that had a website at one point in time, but they have since moved on to Facebook. However, as you can see via Google, their website seems to have been taken over, or at least being redirected. But this does also, besides ways that we'll talk about that PACs can be possibly malicious or misleading, we also have to think about the fact that PACs themselves, with their unlimited fundraising, could become targets. So we identified two potentially misleading ways that super PACs could operate online. They could either do it through cloaking or phishing, or, as we mentioned, cyber squatting. But there's also the fact of using the funds contrary to their stated goals. So one of the PACs that we looked into was the Coalition of Americans for Political Equality. We found that they were cyber squatting for Alan West, 2012, and Mitt Romney in 2012. Both of these had the appearance of official campaign sites, but in small print at the top and bottom of the pages, they were saying they were being funded by the KPAC. Initially, if donations were made against the site, it actually went to fund KPAC, but after some news reports came out, they started to redirect the donation links to the actual politicians' donation sites. Over the 2012 election, they managed to raise $1.5 million. But when you actually looked at it, less than $200,000 seemed to be, at least according to the FEC filings, were for or against any specific candidates. And all of this was actually filed after July 2012 in the final quarterly report or in the post or pre-election reports. It also should be noted that because this PAC came under fire, there were a lot of news reports about it. A lot of people were demanding refunds, and about $100,000 were given back in refunds to their donators. We also have the Heart of America Super PAC, which promised to promote moderate Republicans and Democrats, pretty much trying to get both sides of the aisle working together. However, when you started to look at the actual FEC filings, they brought in a total of about $788,000. But when you look at how they spent that money, $1,300 of it was spent on Democrat Claire McCaskill's re-election campaign, and the large bulk of the money, $758,000, was donated to another PAC, the Majority PAC, which was used to maintain Democrat Senate majority. Here we have a screenshot of the HOA PAC's website promoting mainstream values and moderate politicians such as Bob Dole and Tom Eagleton. But like many of the cyber squatting websites we ran into, their page is no longer available today. A little bit more inventive of an error page. With that, I will turn it over to Matt.
So as Josh alluded to earlier, we received lots of spam, tons and tons of spam through multiple email accounts as we were preparing for our presentation and everything. We didn't actually receive this letter. We wish we did. We got this from another article, and it's from an evil Michelle Obama, basically purporting to give somebody $20 million if they provided a phone number and or an address, and I think there was a sum of $248 or something like that. But that's fantastic stuff. So as a side project, if someone would like to act as Chris Hansen and contact this person, evil Michelle Obama, that would be awesome. During our research, we identified a large number of people selling votes on sites like eBay and Craigslist. We used Google to search eBay listings and using, just standard Google terms like buy my vote site ebay.com, and we found tons of bids tons of examples starting as low as $1 and running as high as $10,000. Sellers would promote proof of their vote as by using a photograph of their ballot taken after they voted. By our calculations, though, across America, on average, Obama spent about $8.48 per vote, and Romney spent about $8.24 per vote. I mean, that's basic back-of-the-napkin cocktail calculations. But with those figures in mind, the votes for sale on these social networks were certainly being overpriced. So for looking at this ad that's provided in the slide for $25, somebody's really upselling in Aurora, Colorado, and is already smoking pot before it was even allowed. It's certainly realistic that voters in swing states could certainly be sold for a higher premium, especially during the presidential elections, unlike states where results are a foregone conclusion by election day. So social networks, as people voted, they posted digital I voted stickers on their profile to demonstrate their pride in exercising their democratic right to vote. Some people posted pictures of their actual ballots and to explicitly show who they were voting for, and as I just previously mentioned, these pictures can also provide proof of receipt in the event that they are selling their vote. So taking pictures of ballots is actually illegal in a number of states. We contacted several Secretary of State's offices where these laws are on the books, and those offices didn't claim to be enforcing these laws, and they were uncertain of the actual law's enforcement within those states. So, So on this slide is a picture of a number of ballots that we found on Facebook. We found a lot of ballots, actually, Twitter and Flickr, and we believe the bottom left person may actually be a candidate, maybe selling his vote. So this picture is a couple of, these pictures are a blast from the past. They're actual tweets from last November's 2013 New York City mayoral race, where they reverted to lever machines. Yeah, it's not the 2012 election, but we thought you might like to see how exciting tweets get about lever machines. And Josh is a big nerd and has a lever machine. Oh, okay, somebody else does. Speaking of crimes, we don't think this picture is being photoshopped, and somebody's definitely sharing their vote here illegally. And we also got this picture off Twitter. So.
That's real election crime right there.
Yeah, that's that punk and his old lady.
Dog registered.
Moving over to big data, because this really blew up during the 2012 election. Given the recent discussions in the last 6 months of online privacy in the news and everything, we wanted to touch on this subject, even though we don't have a lot of empirical data aside from online articles. So, it's really worth discussing this, though. Don't forget that both Obama and Romney relied heavily on various big data and online tracking mechanisms to better target voters within their specific demographics. Both parties gathered massive amounts of personal data on the American electorate during the campaign. The use of big data by campaign left a lot of unanswered questions in its aftermath, such as what information was specifically gathered on the electorate, on me, on you? How is this data used? What happens to the data now that the election is over? The campaigns used a variety of cyber-related techniques to collect information on the American electorate, including an extensive use of tracking cookies to determine your online habits and preferences, combing through open source data left by users on social networking sites, and buying up tons of data from companies that mine for information such as online shopping histories, and gambling tendencies, and your dating preferences. So your dating preferences will determine or help them determine how you're going to vote. It is said that Obama's quote, army of nerds won him the election through the use of data collected through his big data system called Narwhal. So here's a picture of the Obama for America iPhone app that provided detailed party affiliation information about voters down to their neighborhoods and streets. And this is really what $1 billion can buy you. Too bad he didn't use this same army of nerds for healthcare.gov. Speaking of failures, during the election, the GOP's big data system, Orca, failed in true Rube Goldbergian fashion. Poll workers in swing states had issues accessing this data and may not have had the information they needed to get more Romney supporters to the polls. Although there is no evidence to back this claim, hacktivist organization Anonymous claimed to be responsible for the infrastructure failures of Orca by creating an attack that they called the Great Oz, awesome name, which purported to be targeted password using a targeted password protected firewall that they installed on all of the Orca gateway servers to disrupt traffic flows. So we're unsure of the current state of Orca after the election, given its failure, but because it was funded by Karl Rove, we probably won't see the last of it. The letter that we have on the slide is actually fantastic. We cite it in our resources if you want to go read the whole thing. But it says, you know, we watched as Carl's little boys and girls confidently ran their tests while Carl sold his barons to smoke cigars. I can't see it. It's super small. As far as Obama for America's Narwhal big data system, that was transferred to Organizing for Action after the election, so we definitely won't see the last of that. Foreign influence. In our paper, we cited a report by the Government Accountability Institute, which deeply explored the activities of foreign influences in the 2012 presidential election. Throughout all of our research, we tried to be unbiased one way or the other and tried to present the most unbiased, data in terms of the election. So I'm just going to note that Government Accountability Institute appears to be very conservative, but they mentioned a number of other things that we kind of ran into during our work. So it's worth discussing the foreign side of things by citing them. Their report went into considerable detail about Obama.com, a website owned by an Obama bundler named Robert Roach with significant business ties to China. His website generated about 68% of its traffic from foreign locations, and in 2012, it began redirecting its users to the Obama campaign donation page at my.barackobama.com. After the report, after that GAI report came out, in September 2012, Obama.com was modified to redirect its users to the Obama campaign's primary website. After the 2012 election, Obama.com is no longer pointing to any location, or was no longer pointing to any location, but is now pointing to Organizing for Action's website. It's worth noting that the Obama campaign responded to allegations from the report by claiming that they had other ways to determine the source for campaign donations and return money in cases where they believed it was from a foreign source. When combing through the raw data posted on the website, we found a number of links to both Obama and Romney's campaign websites from foreign sources, and where the information was posted on blogs and things, and people were discussing donating from offshore places. We note that although both campaigns claim to not accept foreign donations, they do not appear to differentiate between citizens and non-citizens when they target their spam. So speaking of going along the lines of foreign influence, we wanted to specifically note the case of Miami-Dade County. Miami-Dade received about 2,500 fraudulent absentee ballot requests to their elections website in July 2012. Officials identified the requests as malicious and noted that about 2,000 of the requests came in from a foreign IP address, probably masked by Tor or VPN or something. But all the ballots were filled in manually, not automatically, and appeared to be very similar in nature. So they weren't pseudo-randomly, or they weren't random. They were very similar. So that's why they were all flagged and rejected. The first few ballot requests that were domestic came from specifically within Miami-Dade County, which set a red flag to investigators. And they were tracked down to 2 individuals working on a congressional campaign within the county. So they used their own IP addresses before saying, hey, we shouldn't do that here. Great. A grand jury made about 23 security recommendations to Miami-Dade County afterwards to tighten up the rules governing the absentee ballot software. And we thought it was awesome, or spoke bounds about Miami-Dade County that they're receiving their security recommendations from a grand jury. So near-term predictions. So to discuss the upcoming 2014 elections, maybe the 2016 elections, we thought we'd take the opportunity to kind of make some predictions about the way things are going and will potentially be going over the next 2 to 4, or I guess one this year to 2016. But we believe that cryptocurrencies may be targeted by campaign fundraising and cyber squatting sites. So we'll get to hear more about Bitcoin in the news. We think the election data collected by systems like Orca and Narwhal will become even more desirable for external organizations and will become, well, if they're not already, a definite predictor of how you vote. If these systems are hacked and or the data is stolen, it's possible that malware could be developed to target people just based on your political views. So speaking of malware, we believe it'll be developed in conjunction with election crimes or fraudulent absentee ballot attacks, as in the Miami-Dade case. So thinking back to that case in the previous slide, that case was actually detected because every manual attack was filled in very similarly, but we believe that automation could simply fix that, randomly create absentee ballots and obfuscate their source. So we will continue to see more on PACs in the upcoming election. They control a lot of money. Under most circumstances, their malicious intentions may be difficult to determine until after the election, which is worth noting. And we wanted to kind of put it out there if we thought, or if anybody here who's familiar with such things has any other thoughts for possible cyber activities to watch out for in the upcoming election. If not, cool. So conclusions. So we selected this project for our class as research into malicious cyber techniques and motivations was somewhat lacking for the last election cycle. Presentation is meant to serve as a snapshot in time, as Josh said, and attacks and techniques are going to continue to evolve in future elections. Determining some of the intent and structure of the big data systems should be an interesting point of research, and it would be great if the architectural decisions into those into the data collection is leaked for public consumption, and fake campaigns and fundraising will become even more sophisticated. That's part of the fun, right? So, it's Game of Thrones. So, lastly, we want to take the opportunity to encourage everyone to vote and volunteer to be a poll worker if you can. So,
Be a poll worker.
yeah. Any questions?
And also, if you have questions, could you step up to the microphone, please?
Are these microphones working?
Yeah.
They work.
My question is, do you have any intuition about how the U.S. is moving toward electronic voting, internet voting? Like, have you seen any patterns?
Yeah, so if you want to go online, the Election Assistance Commission has this document called a Survey of Internet Voting, and it actually documents every single case of internet voting in the whole world from 1998 up until August of 2012, and so that will show you all of the history of internet voting. Right now, there is sort of a backlash against internet voting and just sort of electronic voting in general in the U.S. The U.S. has really made a big pivot towards optical scan systems. So DREs are actually being used less and less. I think for the most part, it's really Maryland, Georgia, Mississippi. I think those are the big states basically using statewide DRE systems.
So I want to talk a little bit about Carl again. Carl seemed so sure on Fox News that Ohio was going to go Romney, and so much so that even after the numbers had come in on the majority, he still thought that it was going to come back to Romney. And I know you guys don't have the evidence, but how do you feel? I mean, do you think that he thought that way because he had some ace in the hole that he thought was working?
So there was an interesting article from a source that was kind of only one article that I could find on that question, on that specific question, and they said that they believed Carl was using some of the Orca servers within Ohio to potentially do some kind of denial of service attack on ballots as they were being transferred electronically. But as to the specifics of that, I'm unsure. But that was one of the reasons that Anonymous claimed to have targeted that system, because they found out that strategic attack in advance.
The rest of y'all feel the same?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think so.
That's what I thought. Thanks.
In the Miami-Dade, did you find that the fraudulent ballots were fraudulent, predominantly requests for ballots that were meant to they actually never got into the system, or did they find any actual fraudulent ballots?
Yeah, so there were 2,500 requests made, is what the actual grand jury report says, and I believe about 500 of those came from Miami-Dade County. The grand jury did not. I didn't see anything inside of that report where they thought that any ballots had gotten into the system and had been counted. But I think it would be really interesting to look at how they did that, because those like that's probably going to be a big issue later on in the future. There should be, you know, policy and procedures surrounding that. I didn't see a big discussion about what they did to look into that. So who knows?
One of the things, one of the pros of using optical scanners is, of course, you've got this paper ballot that you can go back to. And while it is fairly simple to counterfeit a paper ballot, the ones that we studied used two separate kinds of ink. One was the scanner could read, one which the scanner couldn't. And you can basically make the controlled, highly expensive scanner can't read this ink out of going and buying cheap coloring cartridges and just mixing the colors. As long as it doesn't take carbon, the scanner can't see it. So a gel pen would also do the same thing. But that doesn't scale well.
No, no.
And
Well, it does. It does if you actually influence the ballot printers, because typically a lot of these counties go to, you know, like these, you know, 5 to 10 large ballot printers, and so if you mess with the ink there, that would scale a little bit
and I expect
decent.
you would find some factor in it and also print them off photos. But there is an additional problem in that once they are scanned into the system, then all the results are digital. And that's on a CF card or a flash drive or whatever. And a recount that would require the paper ballot, there has to be a certain percentage of it, or the candidate has to be put forth themselves. So the likelihood of corruption after scanning it and after and just affecting the total one way or another is still very high and from having to prevent that.
My understanding is that a lot of the recounts go back to the actual paper. That's what one would hope.
There is a counterexample to that.
Oh, really?
It did happen once where they recounted the digital side of things, and somebody had to force them to go back to the paper.
So they just looked inside of the database again and said, "Yep, those numbers are still there." Interesting. Thank you.
So you mentioned that overseas they're doing a lot of online voting. If you look at the security of many of those overseas systems, and what do you see as the obstacles to the U.S. and to similar systems?
Could you say that once more? I'm super sorry.
Yeah, so you said that overseas they're doing some online voting, or moving over to that system. So have you looked at the security of any of those systems, and what do you see as the obstacles to the U.S. and moving to similar systems?
Man, that's a really in-depth. That's a really good question. The security mechanisms in place by the different systems being used worldwide vary widely. Some of them really are just a client-server architecture. I'm just gonna SSL encrypt my vote and send it to the server and make sure that server's hardened. Probably not the best way to secure that. Some of the newer systems are using a special type of encryption known as homomorphic encryption, where basically you can add up votes while they are still encrypted, and then just decrypt the result, which is super interesting, right? I mean, you don't really see that being used much. Additionally, trying to think what else. There have been basically Australia in 2010 had a giant private network, probably similar to what we would consider for the DISN, the Defense Information Systems Network, where their military basically ran their own whole network that they had military voters vote on or vote with. I think that's a very interesting security measure. I think the big obstacle here is voter identification, making sure that I'm voting for me at home instead of Robert, and then really auditability. being able to make sure that my vote was cast as intended and then counted as cast, but not able to bring it back to me. And then just general endpoint security, keeping a public-facing box on the internet secure is really difficult.
Right, so overseas, they're just coming out with like client servers, like how are they guaranteeing the person overseas?
How are they guaranteeing the
The identity of the person overseas?
So basically, is Estonia and Norway and like other places that have done this for basically military, they have a national PKI set up basically. So it's a personal identification card, a citizen card of sorts, and that sort of robust system like that is actually really useful for these types of activities. A national ID card does not leave a good taste in your typical American's mouth there. I would kind of pass, so I think that's a big issue.
I have a driver's license.
Very helpful.
Thank you very much.
I can answer that question about electronic voting, studies on how to do secure voting systems. There have been a couple that have been developed. Particularly, if you look at the security protocols workshops, proceedings for a couple of years, look for Peter Ryan's work. In particular, and in which he proposes a system where the voter gets an encrypted receipt. It doesn't provide any information that can identify voter with vote cast, but the voter can actually go and then his protocol allows the voter to go and online later on and show that their vote was counted the way they intended it to be without reading any information about it. But it's more complicated than I think Joe wants to use, and so these things are just put in.
Not very usable either. One more question. Cool. I think we got to get out of here in a second.
How's it been, or what are the implications of using cyber currency and validating contributions?
Well, you guys take that one.
Validating. I mean, obviously, it can be used to validate the source. I don't know. We didn't really get to touch really on cyber currency within this report. I've become a Bitcoin user, since we worked on this project, but we didn't really look at cyber currencies.
Right. It was something we identified as probably coming up, could be a problem in the future. I believe it was just a couple months ago announced that one U.S. senator a politician was going to use it for his Senate run to accept donations in Bitcoin. The politician's name is escaping me at the moment.
No, it was like a Texas state senator, I believe.
Yes.
But I think that is actually going to be really hard to track down. I mean, Bitcoin's kind of made to be anonymous, right? Even though there is sort of a cryptographic proof of that transaction taking place. Kind of interesting. Anyway, I think we have to get off. So.
Let us thank the speakers for a very bright talk and talk about
I hope thanks very much.
I wish you guys had